Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Adjutant General, Major General Richard Dena, thank you for attending today's event with our remarkable airwoman in our ranks. I'm Command Sergeant Major Dena Ballowe, your facilitator for this event. November is Native American Heritage Month. It celebrates and honors the histories and cultures of Native Americans and Indigenous people in the United States. Please stand and let us recite the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the prayer with Colonel Shell. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us remain standing as we pray. Father God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your grace and mercy that's upon us. Father, Lord, during these challenging times, we ask that you continue to watch over us. But Lord, we come to celebrate today. We've come to celebrate a people you've made, Father, Lord, that you designed for your own glory. We thank you for our brothers and sisters who are Native Americans, Father, Lord, who have fought beside us, who live with us, Father, Lord, in our communities. And we thank you for the presentation today, Father, Lord. We ask that you glorify this evening. We ask that you watch over us and keep us. And Lord, we just thank you for this opportunity to celebrate these remarkable people. We love you, we praise you, we thank you. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, sir. Please be seated. On August 3rd, 1990, President of the United States, George H.W. Bush, declared the month of November as National American Indian Heritage Month, thereafter commonly referred to as Native American Heritage Month. The bill read in part that the President has authorized and requested to call upon federal, state, and local governments, groups, and organizations, and the people of the United States to observe such month with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. This was a landmark bill honoring Americans' tribal people. This commemorative month aims to provide a platform for Native American people in the United States of America to share their cultures, traditions, music, crafts, dance, ways, and concepts of life. This gives Native people the opportunity to express to their communities, country, county, and state officials their concerns and solutions for building bridges of understanding and friendship in their local communities. Federal agencies are encouraged to provide education programs for the employees regarding Native American history, rights, culture, and contemporary issues to better assist them in their jobs and for overall awareness. Now we will watch a video that further explains that significant observance.
It's a great day to be Native. Today marks the beginning of Native American Heritage Month. While Thanksgiving tends to be the highlight of November and the holiday most closely associated with Native history, Thanksgiving is not the end-all be-all of Native American history. While we love turkey and football, we want to go beyond the festivities of the holiday because this month is an opportunity for the Indigenous people to share their perspectives at a national level. It serves as a platform to acknowledge and celebrate the contributions of Native Americans and their achievements. But before we get into all that, let's take a dive into the origins of Native American Heritage Month. This national recognition of our heritage actually began as a day that was advocated by several individuals and groups as far back as 1914 to 1915. For instance, Red Fox James from the Blackfoot Confederacy traveled from state to state across the country on horseback to gain support for a day designated for Indigenous people. Dr. Arthur C. Parker from the Seneca Nation actually convinced the Boy Scouts to adopt a day dedicated to the first Americans. On behalf of the annual Congress of the American Indian Association, Reverend Sherman Coolidge from the Arapaho tribe issued a proclamation declaring it an American Indian Day in May. These examples go to show that this month actually stemmed from the efforts of Native Americans over a century ago.
Decades after the early 20th century, Congress passed a Senate Joint Resolution in 1986, sponsored by Senator Alan Cranston. It authorized and requested President Ronald Reagan to proclaim an American Indian Week, which he did. Aside from some generalizations about the contributions of Native Americans, the proclamation includes an important statement regarding U.S. tribal relations. We look to the future with the expectation of even stronger tribal governments and lessened federal control over tribal government affairs. We look to a future of development of economic independence and self-sufficiency, and an enhanced government-to-government relationship that will allow greater Indian control of Indian resources. Up until now, we've discussed an annual day and a week acknowledging Native American heritage. But where did the month come from? Well, in 1990, a huge win was secured thanks to Representative Thalia Mavenga, who sponsored a House joint resolution authorizing and requesting President George Bush Sr. to proclaim a National American Indian Heritage Month. The joint resolution sponsored by Thalia Mavenga has some great language saying, whereas the people and the government of the United States should be reminded that certain concepts such as freedom of speech, the separation of powers in government, and the balance of power within government, all of which were found in political systems of various American Indian nations, influenced the formulation of the government of the United States of America. And there's this quote, which is relevant to Wade and I on a personal level, that gives reasoning for this month, which encourages activities which provide positive benefits of enhanced self-esteem, pride, and self-awareness to young American Indians.
Ultimately, Native American Heritage Month means whatever we make it out to mean. It can become a time to discuss concrete policy changes for self-determination, or funding aimed to revitalize tribal languages. We can develop a deeper understanding of the history of different tribes. While that's important, us natives should also spend time at home with friends and families, including our clan members, asking questions, listening to stories, and at the same time helping with the needs of the community. This is our month. This is our heritage. So let's make it worthwhile.
Began in ancient times, tens of thousands of years ago, with the settlement of the Americas by the Paleo-Indians. Anthropologists and archaeologists have identified and studied a wide variety of cultures that existed during this era. Their subsequent contact with Europeans had a profound impact on the history of their people. The Paleo-Indian, or List-Lake stage, lasted from the first arrival of people in the Americas until about 5,000, 3,000 BCE. In North America. 3 major migrations occurred as traced by linguists and genetic data. The early Paleo-Americans soon spread throughout the Americas, diversifying into many hundreds of culturally distinct nations and tribes. By 8,000 BC, the North American climate was very similar to today. A study published in 2012 gives genetic backing to the 1986 theory put forward by linguist Joseph Greenberg that the Americas must have been populated in 3 ways based on language differences. After 1492, European explorations and colonizations of the Americans revolutionized how the Old and New World perceived themselves. One of the first major contacts in what would be called the American Deep South occurred when the conqueror Juan Ponce de Leon, excuse me if I totally got that wrong, landed in Florida in April of 1513. He was later followed by other Spanish explorers such as Pamphilio de Navarra in 1528 and Hernando de Soto in 1539. The subsequent European colonists in North America often rationalized their expansion of empire with the assumptions that they were saving a barbaric pagan world by spreading Christian civilization. In the Spanish colonization of the Americans, the policy of Indian reductions resulted in forced conversions to Catholicism of the indigenous people in northern Nueva España. They had long established spiritual and religious traditions and theological beliefs. What developed during the colonial years and since has been a centric Catholicism that absorbed and reflected indigenous beliefs. The religion changed in New Spain. Native American culture began to have an influence on European thought in this period. Some Europeans considered Native American society to be representative of a golden age known to them only in folk history. The political theorist Juan Vázquez Rosales wrote that the ideal of freedom and democratic ideals was born in the America because it was only in America that Europeans from 1500 to 1776 knew of societies that were truly free. During the American Revolution, the newly proclaimed United States competed with British for the allegiance of Native American nations east of the Mississippi River. Most Native Americans who joined the struggle sided with the British, based both on their trading relationship and hopes that colonial defeat would result in a halt to further colonial expansion into the Native American land. Many Native communities were divided over which side to support in the war, and others wanted to remain neutral. The first Native community to sign a treaty with the United States government was the Lenape. For the Iroquois Confederacy, based in New York, the American Revolution resulted in civil war. The only Iroquois tribe to ally with colonials were the Oneida and the Tuscarora. The United States was eager to expand, to develop farming and settlements in new areas, and to satisfy land hunger from settlers from New England and new immigrants. The national government initially sought to purchase Native American land by treaty. The states and settlers were frequently at odds with this policy. European nations sent Native Americans, sometimes against their will, to the Old World as objects of curiosity. They often entertained royalty and were sometimes prey to commercial purposes. Christianization of Native Americans was a chartered purpose for some European colonies. Civil War. Many Native Americans served in the military during the Civil War on both sides. By fighting with the whites, Native Americans hoped to gain favor with the prevailing government by supporting the war effort. General Eli S. Parker, a member of the Seneca tribe, described the terms of the Article of Surrender which General Robert E. Lee signed at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9th of 1865. General Parker, who served as General Ulysses S. Grant's military secretary and was a trained attorney, was once rejected for Union military service because of his race. At Appomattox, Lee is said to have remarked to Parker, "I'm glad to see one real American here," to which Parker replied, "We're all Americans." General Stanwati, a leader of the Cherokee Nation and Confederate Indian Cavalry commander, was the last Confederate general to surrender his troops. Native Americans and U.S. citizenship. In 1817, the Cherokee became the first Native Americans recognized as U.S. citizens. Under Article 8 of the 1817 Cherokee Treaty, upwards of 300 Cherokees, head of families, and the honest simplicity of their souls, made an election to become American citizens. The next earliest recorded date of Native Americans becoming U.S. citizens was in 1831, when some Mississippi Choctaw became citizens after the United States Congress ratified the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek. Article 22 sought to put a Choctaw representative in the U.S. House of Representatives. Under Article 14 of the treaty, any Choctaw who elected not to move with the Choctaw Nation would become an American citizen when he registered and if he stayed on designated lands for 5 years after the treaty's ratification. Through the years, Native Americans became U.S. citizens by either treaty provisions, as with the Cherokee, registration and land allotment under the Dawes Act of February 8, 1887, assurance of patent in fee simple, adopting habitats of civilian life, minor children, citizenship by birth, becoming soldiers and sailors of the United States Armed Forces, marriage to a U.S. citizen, and by special acts of Congress. In 1857, Chief Justice Roger B. Taney expressed the opinion of the court that since Native Americans were free and independent people, they could become U.S. citizens. Taney asserted that Native Americans could be naturalized and join the political community of the United States. Some 44,000 Native Americans served in the United States military during World War II. At the time, 1/3 of all able-bodied Indian men from 18 to 50 years of age, the entry of young men into the United States military during World War II has been described as the first large-scale exodus of Indigenous people from the reservation. It involved more people than any migration since the removals from areas east of the Mississippi River of the early 19th century. The men's service in the United States military in the international conflict was a turning point in Native American history. The overwhelming majority of Native Americans welcomed the opportunity to serve. They had a voluntary re-enlistment rate that was 40% higher than those who were drafted. War Department officials said that if the entire population had enlisted in the same proportions as the Native Americans, the response would have rendered the draft unnecessary. Now we'll watch a video which highlights some of our famous military Native Americans.
دي بقدر وان أشلاء رئيس نزن كيدني هاي دوا بيت لطوصنة نزن grids أشلاء ناكير.
They were considered the secret weapon of World War II, the Navajo Code Talkers, a small group of 400 Native Americans who spoke a language no one could crack.
To the Japanese, it was like speaking underwater, and it was impossible to encrypt by the Japanese themselves.
Staff Sergeant Ronaldo Jumbo holds this history close to his heart. The Code Talkers were his people, and his grandfather was one of them.
Artillery, code word.
It was plain and simple with the Navajo Code Talkers themselves. They had one mission, that was one mission only.
In code, Private Whitehorse.
To send and receive messages secretly.
Marines called upon the Navajo after Pearl Harbor. You see, the Japanese had learned other Native American languages, but the Navajo tongue was so difficult to understand, it became the perfect weapon.
Our people back at home, we grew up using, pitchforks, using our hands, washing our clothes by hand.
This was totally foreign.
This is totally foreign to our people back then.
So, to familiarize themselves with Western war, the Code Talkers went through boot camp at MCRD and then basic training at Camp Elliott. This is Camp Elliott. It's now called East Miramar, but the Marines still train here. just like they did 70 years ago. The code talker sent thousands of messages from 1942 to 1945 using phones like this one, warning troops about the enemy and relaying critical tactical details. Historians credit the Navajo for the victory at Iwo Jima and re-energizing Allied forces.
In my eyes, that changed the war.
Up 50! Fire for effect!
They were at the pivotal moment of when the U.S. needed our help. Regardless of the facts of what happened in our history, we still stood up and stood up for our country.
A country that is still using the skills of the Navajo during wartime.
We're proud of our heritage, and that's what we stand for. The Navajo code talkers themselves, set a really good example for those of us who are in the military as well.
We all know we have very remarkable soldiers and airmen within our ranks. So today I would like to introduce to you and welcome to the stage Chief Master Sergeant Teresa Ray.
Thank you.
Chief Ray, could you provide us, please have a seat.
Thank you.
Could you provide us with some remarkable background information about yourself, your current position, your marital status, children, how long you've been serving in the military, what do you do in and out of uniform, hobbies, and family activities that you'd like to share, and some of your personal beliefs and values?
Okay. Well, I am, I've been in the military over 34 years. I came in 1984, had a small break, came back in, went into the reserves, and then last year I came into the Illinois Air National Guard. My family, as far as that is concerned, I'm married to my husband. We've been married for 21 years. I have a blended family, so I have 7 children, 5 grandchildren, and 1 on the way. We love to do family gatherings and like to spend time together. And as they've become adults, and because they've been a family, I try not to put too many stressors on them. Right now, there are so many, so we set certain dates to do family events that maybe aren't as conventional as, others. Like we'll do Thanksgiving, but it's not actually on Thanksgiving, but we'll do our recognition. Same thing with Christmas, and then just once in a while, where we just celebrate with food. Outside of work, I like to get out, I like to stay active. So in the military, I used to go play softball. Back then, there were, your MWR events, and you could go and play and have a good time and stay active and represent your base or your team. Those went away a little bit with money, but we still continue to do that. I played women's league. I played on a women's volleyball team years ago. And now that I'm getting a little older and I can't run or do as much, I'm playing golf. And I really, really enjoy it. I like just kind of like the competition. I'm not that good, but I really feel like if I try, my best and just have a good time and get out. And I have a lot of fun. I play with my husband. So he's much better than I am, and so I do appreciate that he actually will take time out to spend time with me.
Are you competitive with him too?
What's that mean?
Are you competitive with him?
Oh, yes, sometimes. I started out with the, what is it? It's what is it for show? Play for show and putt for dough. Yes, yes. So yes, I love to hit the driver. I like to hit as far as I can, but I'm working on my short game. So that's something different. But family, again, means a lot to me, and then just spending as much time as I can and having a balance. I feel like we have to put our family first, but I also know that they support me in what I do. I mean, like right now I'm here. They've grown up kind of like their whole life knowing about reschedules, because I've had to reschedule their birthday and I've had to reschedule family events around my drill. So we have they understand like when it's like the first of the month, or they'll ask, we schedule stuff around that. And those are some of the things I like to do with them.
That's awesome. If I'm gonna go off script here a little
Yes,
bit,
ma'am.
because as we were talking before the event, and in going through just trying to teach and to spread our joint diversity and inclusion and equity and equality. Inclusion means a lot to me. And before the event, we were talking, and you just kind of mentioned again about the gathering around with food. And you had stated that as you were kind of reading through things that we'd sent you, that you dug further into your family. And what's the one thing you said about Grandma that I said we can all relate as Grandma, no matter what, where?
Right. Grandma brings the food, brings everything together, and everything seems to center around food. But that's what brings us really all together. Just even on my grandfather's side was the Native American side, and my grandmother was the Mexican American side. So some of the foods I grew up were all mainly the Mexican American, and which in every Hispanic family has, I won't say every, but tamales. And it's always around the holidays, and we became like this small factory in my grandmother's house where we just make the meals, and she had different types, different flavors, and I love those memories. I wish I would have taken on some of those skills or maybe paid a little more attention. Now I'm having to learn on YouTube. My sister's much better at it, but on YouTube is actually the next go-to to do it, and or just buying them.
There you go.
But yeah, my grandfather was just like, he would sit in the chair and he'd have his, we'd hug him, tell him we love him, and then go play, and then Grandma would feed us. But he would sit in his chair, listen to the Dodger game. I'm from Southern California. I didn't get to mention that part, in San Bernardino, California. And one of our memories was always him listening to the game with his one earbud speaker, when it was just one earbud.
So as we celebrate our diversity, but then we can all, gather around with the common sense that Grandma's going to feed you, by golly, no matter what, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So, Chief Ray, how did you come about choosing to serve in the military, and why the Air Force? Has it always been Air Force, or?
It was not always the Air Force. So I came in because my father served in the Korean War. My father was a big person. He inspired me in everything I do. A lot of my memories stem always back to him, and my mother as well. But my father is the one who, I was the tomboy, so I always did a lot of things with him. And he would talk to me about his war stories, and I would sit and listen to him. And I was just fascinated with just the things that he did, And he served 2 years in the Army, and I wanted to do my part with our country as well. And I knew I was going to serve, so I was going to go to the Marines. And that was just one of the branches I served first. Well, my brother was already a Marine, and my brother had told me, you need to go to the Air Force. He goes, now that I've already been in, your way of life is going to be just a little bit better. And so I did. I went in, and I went into the Air Force, and I've been in, and I've loved it. It's made me grow. I feel like I brought my foundation, and then the Air Force could build on it, and even some of the ways that I think, or even my perspective has changed from if I still lived back at home, not being in the military.
Definitely. Chief Ray, how do you feel about representing your family with serving in the military today, and what encouraging words do you have for our listeners out there?
Well, I love, even though this is my married name, my real name is Teresa Villa, and I always think of my dad. I think of all of my family that has served along with me. When I came in the military, my father at the time was the only one, my uncle Nico, and my brother. Those were the three. Well, since then, it seems like it's become a family, I would say just a trade, but it's like my nephew has retired down from the Marines. I have another nephew who did 4 years in the Army and now is a veteran. And then I have another nephew who is in the Army Guard in Kansas, and he right now is deployed in Kuwait.
I agree wholeheartedly.
And my husband served 22 years active duty. Let me not forget one very important person. My son is currently serving in the Air Force right now as well.
I love him. Active duty or guard?
He is active duty.
Active duty.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. I often call it the family business.
Yes, ma'am. And you know, here, and then that's one of the things I've noticed here is it is a family business. And it is good to see that a lot of people following in each other's footsteps and doing what's good for our state and as far as our nation as well.
Oh. What are your plans for the near future?
Well, I see my future as being retired, playing more golf, traveling, spending time with my family and my grandchildren. I've done a lot of things, I say as far as like even just getting here, but I put I think all of us as military members do a lot of sacrifice to do our job here. So anything out of here, some of the things I would still like to do though is be a volunteer. I feel like I want to still continue to do some type of community service. I've always envisioned myself as the airman or the Red Cross volunteer who is passing out the prescriptions at the pharmacy and say, have a nice day, because I feel that I still would like to do things outside of, you know, the retired life, something that just still keeps me connected.
You know, we have Lincoln's Challenge, right?
What's that, ma'am?
Lincoln's Challenge Academy, we'll talk.
All right.
Everyone, we will talk. So can you share with us some of your personal thoughts on the culture of the Native American, their history culture of the Native Americans, and how do you feel or do you see that the military has embraced that and started to actually celebrate it within our ranks?
I think so. So for one, I was growing up, I knew I was Native American. I came from a tribe called Tongva, which is through San Gabriel, California. They're called the Gabrielinos. I want to make sure I said it correctly. And it was a tribe that basically was diminished in the mid-1800s. And so I talked with a relative, my cousin, who, when he was explaining to me, there was more to it than just like the tribe, you know, going away, and other than thinking I know I'm Native American. I also have a registration number that affiliates me back to the bloodline. And it's only in California, because the tribe I'm from is not a recognized tribe federally, but in the state of California it's recognized. So my great-grandmother was an informant for an ethologist and a linguist to help keep the language. And so she was one of those that helped, and I believe his name was John Harrington. So his studies were never published, but they're in the Smithsonian Institute. So that will be one of my retired travels, you know, is one of those things I would like to go see. But many of my grandmother is buried in the San Gabriel Mission in California. But my grandfather was one of the first, I guess, children to go to the Sherman Institute, where they took the Indian and the Native American children and they moved them to Riverside, California to stimulate them into the population, where you learned another skill. So they were separated even as family. So I was telling you before how my grandfather's stoic look was. And then I go back to looking at, like, he had been through some things that, you know, like probably a lot of painful things growing up. And so for him, there was no expression. And it helped me to understand maybe, like, not just him being grandpa in the chair anymore, but maybe it's just like, hey, this is my life now, and I'm just going to live as best I can and do the things I like to do. He lived to be 88 years old as well. And I do see the military embracing the Native American culture, because being in the Air Force as long as I have now, I love seeing these observances go on, and I like to be a part of all of them. And I talked with Dr. Klosik, who's our HRA at the 183rd, and we've had discussions about this, but our drills sometimes are so packed with so much and so many events that maybe once a year doing the multicultural observance or something where we actually can get out. And I know it's all, some of this just came out prior to COVID. So with this, maybe in the future, having some other type of way to recognize or acknowledge.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent idea to come together and celebrate our diversity.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
make it inclusive for all of us. Yeah, that's excellent.
Exactly, the food.
Yeah, and the food, exactly, yeah. So around the world, women are becoming more prominent in positions of authority, or so I'm told. What do you see for the future of the United States as it concerns Native Americans? What do you see the future as it concerns Native Americans in the Illinois National Guard?
Well, I guess I had not really looked at that way, like as me being a woman in power. I have done everything I can to try and get where I'm at. I've done things that, I've taken challenges and turned them into opportunities. Sometimes there's days, and even with deployments, you know, it's like, oh no, I don't know what I'm going to do to get here, but sometimes you just gotta go do it. And sometimes believing in yourself to do certain things, and always learning from people who are around you. And I feel that with the putting faith in others to do things, no matter what, no matter who they are, you know, as far as like what background they come, give everyone the opportunity to be that person. Put those that, like just giving them the opportunity to do something versus who they represent. Like, don't look at me as a woman, look at me as a person who has some professional skills, has gone through professional development to go where she is at. And I really have enjoyed the time growing up and I say growing up in the military because I joined when I was 19 years old. So I left from Southern California, and my first duty station was Scott Air Force Base. So it was a cultural shock for me, but I was able to blend in the military. And as a female, I did have certain things that, when I first came in, that were obstacles that I have seen the military change for the better. And hearing, when I came in, the stories of women were even worse. So I try to just keep my things in perspective of always just moving forward, you know, and putting certain things in perspective for certain individuals now of the way things are. I look at when I first had my first son, 4 weeks of convalescent leave, and then it was come back to work, and then it was also, I don't think I had to take my fitness test right away, but I know it was within 6 months.
Pretty quick.
Yes, yeah. So you're bounce back and hurry, and maybe it wasn't an understanding of how maybe, our, you know, just how we are built and how our bodies operate. But seeing some of the things that have evolved for women and just the recognition. And it really just now, I see it now happening for all.
Right. Agreed. So how do you feel we're doing with diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Illinois National Guard and with Native Americans concerning the Illinois? I mean, do you feel we're getting there, we're improving? As you said, we face challenges. Are we improving?
Right. Well, we are improving. I think what hurts right now is COVID. We can't get people in a room. We can't get someone to fly here or there. We have red states that we can't go to. So I know we're going to have a guest speaker not too long ago, I know, for the chiefs and the commanders, and that did not happen. So having maybe just trying to, I think just, I would say yes, we're getting there, but it's gonna take all of us to get there. I see a lot starting from the top, and I've seen this in not just, I guess, diversity, but even when you're merging two organizations together that, you know, we had this commander and you had this commander, but now we all got to merge together. And I had seen that with kind of like the battle between the leadership, but being from the Air Force, all the airmen were still getting along. All the airmen got along. It was the top that really wasn't. So at the top is what really had to change, not really those from below. They followed with what they saw. So I do see it changing. I do feel that we get put in so many challenging positions as well, and, you know, we face adversity. So when we deploy, mobilize, activate, we gotta be ready to go regardless, and you gotta be able to rely on the person that is next to you. So having, maybe a plan to look past some of those, and maybe sometimes it may be open dialect. I may have to just, let's talk it out, and I won't say it's a, agree to disagree type thing. It's just like, maybe you just don't know how I get to this point. And some of the classes I've been to with the HRA training, you know, are biases, getting over your biases, or recognizing your biases. That's really the biggest thing. You know, I think those are just some of the obstacles that we can go for. And we're in the military, so some of the stuff is just like, there's no tolerance for certain things, and there's, if the training is said to happen, let's have the training.
No, great points, and I really appreciate all of your comments and all of your thoughts. I do enjoy that you pointed out even the fact that we are Army and Air National Guard coming together. We're two different cultures, we're two different missions operationally, so we come from different thought processes of how things should be handled. So it is a diverse organization all in that, all by itself, but appreciate you coming with us, coming out here today and giving us some of your history, your background, and your thoughts on everything. And I just, again, I agree. I really like your ideal that maybe we should have a multi-cultural type of day and bring out a lot of food. Everybody have their own right. Cultural food, and let's dig in and celebrate our diverse cultures. That is all we have for today. I will now take any questions from the audience. Nope. Well, thank you again. General Neely, of course, not with us today, but again, thank you for coming out. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our event. I hope you enjoyed our remarkable woman here.
Thank you.
Chief Ray. Please fill out a short questionnaire survey in the back of the room, and thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your